In 2008, something terrible happened in a small town in Texas. It was the kind of crime that people usually see in movies, not in real life. The town was quiet, a place where families felt safe. But one night, everything changed. At the center of this shocking event was a 16-year-old girl named Erin Caffey. She seemed like a regular teenager. She went to school, spent time with her family, and had dreams for the future. But there was one thing that made her different: her deep love for her boyfriend, Charlie Wilkinson. Charlie was older than Erin and had a strong influence on her. The two were inseparable, always wanting to be together. At first, their love seemed like any other teenage romance. They sent each other sweet messages, talked on the phone late at night, and made big promises about their future. But soon, their relationship became intense, too intense. Erin's parents didn't approve of Charlie. They thought he was a bad influence and tried to keep them apart. But instead of making Erin listen, it made her want to be with Charlie even more. What happened next was something no one could have imagined. The love between Erin and Charlie turned into something dark. It led to a shocking betrayal, one that left almost Erin's entire family dead. The town couldn't believe it. How could a teenage girl, someone who had grown up in their community, be involved in something so horrible? This is the full story of Erin Caffey, a story of love that became dangerous, a story of control and bad decisions, and a story of a tragedy that no one will ever forget. Erin Caffey grew up in a home where faith and family were everything. Her father, Terry Caffey, was not just a Christian. He was a preacher who believed deeply in God and wanted to raise his children with strong values. Her mother, Penny, dedicated her life to homeschooling Erin and her two younger brothers, Matthew and Tyler. She wanted to make sure they learned the right things, stayed away from trouble, and followed their faith closely. The Caffey family seemed perfect from the outside. They went to church every Sunday, sang gospel songs together, and always showed kindness to others. People in town saw them as a model Christian family, loving, polite, and full of faith. But like all families, they had their struggles. Terry and Penny were very strict. They believed in discipline and keeping their children safe from bad influences. They set firm rules about what Erin and her brothers could do, who they could talk to, and where they could go. Erin wasn't allowed to date freely, and she spent most of her time at home or church. Because of this, she never got to experience the things that other teenagers did, like hanging out with friends without supervision or making her own choices about relationships. Then, everything changed when Erin met Charlie Wilkinson. He was charming, confident, and different from anyone she had ever known. Unlike her quiet, sheltered life, Charlie made her feel free. He gave her attention and made her feel special. For the first time, Erin had something that wasn't controlled by her parents. And that feeling was exciting, too exciting. As Erin fell deeper for Charlie, she started to pull away from her family. She no longer wanted to follow the strict rules her parents had set. She wanted more freedom and more time with Charlie. But Terry and Penny saw the danger. They believed Charlie was not the right kind of boy for their daughter. They didn't trust him and tried to keep them apart. But Erin didn't see their rules as protection, she saw them as punishment. And as her parents pushed harder, Erin and Charlie started to rebel. What started as teenage love quickly turned into something much darker, something that no one could have predicted. Erin met Charlie Wilkinson at church, a place where everything was supposed to be safe and pure. But Charlie was different from the other boys she knew. He was older, confident, and had a rebellious streak that excited her. He wasn't like the sheltered, well-mannered kids she had grown up around. He had a wild side, something Erin had never experienced before. Charlie made Erin feel special in a way no one else ever had. He gave her attention, told her she was beautiful, and made her feel important. Erin, who had lived under strict rules her whole life, was drawn to his boldness. She felt like he understood her, like he was offering her something her family never did: freedom. It didn't take long for their relationship to become intense. They were always together, constantly texting and talking. Erin wasn't just in love, she was obsessed. She saw Charlie as her future, the person who made her feel alive. But her parents didn't see it the same way. Terry and Penny quickly realized that Charlie wasn't the kind of boy they wanted for their daughter. He drank, smoked, and had a bad temper. He wasn't respectful or responsible. Worst of all, He was pulling Erin away from her family and faith. The more they saw the changes in their daughter, the more they worried. When they realized how serious the relationship had become, they decided to put a stop to it. They told Erin she could no longer see Charlie. They took away her phone and tried to keep her at home as much as possible. They thought they were protecting her. But instead of keeping Erin safe, it pushed her further into Charlie's arms. She didn't see her parents' rules as love, she saw them as control. In her mind, they weren't looking out for her, they were trying to keep her from being happy. Charlie, too, saw things differently. To him, Erin was not just his girlfriend, she was someone he needed to protect. He believed her parents were cruel and unfair. And the more they fought to keep Erin away from him, the more he felt the need to fight back. Together, Erin and Charlie began to see her family as the enemy. And soon, their love would lead them to make a choice that no one could have ever imagined. Late at night, while the rest of the world was asleep, Erin and Charlie would sneak out just to be together. It didn't matter if it was risky. The thrill of seeing each other in secret made their love feel even stronger. They whispered about running away, dreaming of a life without rules. A place where no one could tell them what to do. A place where they could be free. But as time went on, their conversations changed. The dreams of escape turned into anger. Erin was frustrated. She told Charlie that her parents were ruining her life, and that they would never let her be happy. She felt trapped, like a prisoner in her own home. Charlie hated seeing her upset. He wanted to be the one to save her. He told her he would do anything for her, anything to keep them together. That's when the idea formed. At first, it was just words. A fantasy. But soon, the thought of it became real. If her parents were gone, nothing could stop them. There would be no rules, no one telling them they couldn't be together. It was a dangerous idea, but neither of them turned away from it. Instead, they embraced it. Charlie knew they couldn't do it alone. He brought in his friend, Charles Wade. Unlike Charlie, Charles was rough, violent, and had no hesitation when it came to hurting people. He didn't care about right or wrong. He was the kind of person who would do anything for excitement, and when Charlie told him about the plan, he was all in. Charles's girlfriend, Bobby Johnson, came along too. She wasn't really part of the plan, but she stuck around. Maybe she was curious, maybe she just wanted to be with Charles. Either way, she didn't try to stop what was about to happen. The night of March 1, 2008, was cold and dark. It was the night everything would change forever. Erin sat in the car with Bobby, waiting. Maybe she felt nervous. Maybe she had second thoughts. But she didn't stop them. Charlie and Charles went inside, their hands gripping weapons. They had come prepared, with guns and even a samurai sword. The house was quiet, the family asleep, completely unaware of what was coming. And then, the nightmare began. Erin Caffey was in a deep sleep when the first gunshot shattered the silence. It was loud, sudden, and terrifying. Before he could even understand what was happening, his bedroom door flew open. Standing there were Charlie Wilkinson and Charles Wade, armed and ready to kill. In an instant, they opened fire. Bullets tore through Terry's body, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 times. Pain exploded through him as he collapsed, struggling to breathe. The room spun. Blood soaked the bed. But the worst part wasn't the pain, it was the sound of his wife, Penny, screaming. Charlie and Charles turned their weapons on her next. Penny begged for her life, but it didn't matter. The boys showed no mercy. They shot her multiple times, but even that wasn't enough. Charles raised the samurai sword and slashed at her. The attack was brutal and horrifying. The room was filled with the sounds of violence, gunfire, screams, the awful sound of the sword cutting through flesh. But then, something even worse happened. Terry, barely clinging to life, heard the voices of his 2 sons. Matthew, 13, and Tyler, just 8 years old, had woken up to the chaos. Their frightened cries echoed through the house. They were terrified, confused, helpless. Terry wanted to get up, to stop what was happening, but his body wouldn't move. Somehow, against all odds, Erin Caffey survived. His body was torn apart by bullets, his home was collapsing in flames, and his entire family was gone. But something inside him refused to give up. Bleeding heavily, barely able to move, Terry began the impossible task of escaping. He dragged himself out of the burning house, inch by inch, his body screaming in pain. Smoke filled his lungs, making it harder to breathe, but he kept going. The cold night air hit his wounds, but he didn't stop. He knew if he stayed there, he would die. For nearly an hour, he crawled through the dirt, pulling his broken body across the ground. His destination was his neighbor's house, 400 yards away. It felt like miles. Every movement sent waves of pain through him, but he didn't care. He had to survive. When he finally reached the neighbor's porch, he was barely conscious. His body was covered in soot and blood, his clothes soaked from the nightmare he had just lived through. The neighbors rushed to help him, horrified at what they saw. The first words that came from Terry's mouth were heartbreaking. "My family's gone." The police arrived quickly. They took Terry to the hospital, fighting to keep him alive. While doctors worked to save him, investigators rushed to the crime scene. What they found was devastating: an entire family slaughtered, a house burned to the ground. But something didn't add up. Erin Caffey, the only surviving member of the family besides Terry, played the role of a shocked and grieving daughter. She told police she had been kidnapped. She claimed she didn't know anything about what had happened. She wanted them to believe she was just another victim. But the truth unraveled fast. Investigators found inconsistencies in her story. They started gathering evidence: phone records, witness statements, and most importantly, Terry's account of what had happened. Slowly, the real story came to light. The shocking truth? Erin wasn't an innocent victim. She was the mastermind. The evidence pointed straight to her and Charlie. The police knew they weren't working alone. Soon, Charles Wade and Bobby Johnson were pulled into the investigation. It wasn't long before all four were arrested, their plan completely exposed. What had started as a twisted love story had turned into one of the most horrifying crimes the town had ever seen. And now, there was no escaping the consequences. During the investigation, it didn't take long for the truth to come out. Charlie Wilkinson cracked almost immediately. He confessed everything, every detail, every action. But what shocked investigators the most was that he didn't seem sorry. He showed no remorse. He spoke about the murders as if they were just something he had to do, something he did for love. In his mind, he wasn't a monster, he was a devoted boyfriend who had followed through on a promise to Erin. Erin, on the other hand, wasn't so quick to admit the truth. Her story changed multiple times. At first, she stuck to her lie, claiming she had been kidnapped and had no idea what had happened. When that didn't work, she tried another approach. She said Charlie had forced her to go along with the plan, that she was too scared to stop him. She painted herself as a victim, just like her parents and brothers. But investigators weren't buying it. As they dug deeper, they found messages, conversations, and witness statements that pointed to a different reality. The real mastermind wasn't Charlie, it was Erin. She had been the one who wanted her parents dead. She was the one who had convinced Charlie that it was the only way they could be together. When the case went to court, the verdict was clear. Erin Caffey was charged with capital murder. The judge sentenced her to life in prison, though she was given a small chance of freedom, parole after 40 years. By then, she would be in her mid-50s, having spent most of her life behind bars. Charlie Wilkinson and Charles Wade weren't as lucky. They both received life without the possibility of parole. There would be no second chances, no hope of ever walking free again. Bobby Johnson, who had stayed with the killers but hadn't taken part in the murders, was also punished. She was sentenced to 40 years in prison for her involvement. The case shocked the small Texas town and beyond. How could a teenage girl, raised in a loving, religious home, be capable of something so evil? In the end, Erin's desire for love and freedom had cost her everything: her family, her future, and her life as she knew it. Perhaps the most shocking part of this story wasn't the crime itself, but how Terry Caffey chose to respond. Despite losing his entire family, despite being shot 5 times and left for dead, despite knowing that his own daughter had planned it all, he forgave Erin. People couldn't believe it. How could a father forgive the daughter who had taken everything from him? But Terry didn't see things the way most people did. Instead of holding on to anger and hate, he turned to his faith. He believed forgiveness was the only way to heal. Terry even visited Erin in prison. When he saw her, he didn't yell or ask why. Instead, he told her something that stunned everyone: "I still love you." To him, Erin wasn't a monster. She wasn't beyond saving. He truly believed that Charlie had manipulated her, that she had been a scared, confused girl who had made a terrible mistake. He didn't excuse what she had done, but he didn't want to let hatred destroy him either. Terry's decision to forgive Erin shocked many, but to him, it was the only way forward. He later wrote a book about his journey, sharing how his faith helped him survive the darkest moment of his life. Today, Erin remains in prison. She has spent years living in regret on that terrible night, on the choices she made, and on everything she lost. She will be eligible for parole when she is in her 50s, but whether she will ever walk free remains uncertain. If you love true crime stories and shocking real-life horror cases like this one, make sure to like this video and subscribe to the channel. We bring you the darkest, most twisted cases with all the shocking details you won't believe. Hit that notification bell so you never miss a story, because trust me, there's always another one waiting to be told.